The sun was setting when Zayra noticed something wasn't right with her cat, Pixel. The black and white cat sat perfectly still at their apartment window, staring at the building across the street. This wasn't Pixel's usual window behavior. Normally he'd be tracking birds or taking one of his many naps. "What's got you so interested, buddy?" Zayra asked, walking over to join him. Pixel didn't move, not even when she scratched behind his ears, his favorite spot. His eyes remained fixed on the old brick building opposite their third-floor apartment. Zayra had moved to this quiet part of town 6 months ago with Pixel, who she'd adopted from a shelter 3 years earlier. The cat had helped her through some tough times, especially after losing her job at the tech company. Now she worked from home as a freelance designer, with Pixel keeping her company during long hours at the computer. The next evening, Pixel was at the window again, in the exact same position. Zayra checked what he was looking at, but the building across the street seemed normal. It was a small apartment building like hers, with a coffee shop on the ground floor. This went on for 5 more days. Every evening around the same time, Pixel would sit at the window, completely focused on something Zayra couldn't see. He wouldn't move for his dinner, which wasn't like him at all. Pixel usually started begging for food an hour before mealtime. On the 6th night, Zayra was working late on a project when she heard Pixel meowing loudly. This was new. He'd been silent during his window watches before. She walked over and found him pacing back and forth, still looking at the building. Okay, what is it?" Zayra asked, trying to see what had got him so worked up. The street was quiet, with just a few people walking home from work. The coffee shop was closing up for the night. Then she noticed something, a faint glow from one of the third-floor windows, but it didn't look like normal lighting. It was more like flames? Zayra grabbed her phone and called the fire department. She tried to explain what she saw, feeling a bit silly. Was she overreacting to a weird light? The operators said they'd send someone to check, just to be safe. 10 minutes later, fire trucks pulled up to the building. Zayra watched as firefighters went inside. Soon after, they were helping an elderly man out of the third-floor apartment, right where Pixel had been staring. It turned out a faulty electric heater had started a small fire behind his curtains. If it hadn't been caught early, the whole building could have gone up in flames. The next day, Zayra saw the man sitting at the coffee shop downstairs. His name was Thaddeus, and he lived alone with his model train collection. The fire had damaged some of his trains, but he was just happy to be okay. When Zayra told him about Pixel's strange behavior, Thaddeus insisted on meeting the cat who'd spotted the danger. "Your cat could see the smoke before it was visible from the street," the fire chief explained when he stopped by to follow up. "Cats have much better eyesight than humans, especially in low light. He probably noticed the smoke moving behind the window days before the fire actually started." Word about Pixel's rescue spread through the neighborhood. The coffee shop started offering a Hero Cat's special drink, with a portion of the sales going to the local animal shelter. Thaddeus became a regular visitor, always bringing treats for Pixel. He'd sit and tell stories about his trains while Pixel lounged nearby, now back to his normal relaxed self. Zayra started paying more attention to Pixel's behavior after that. She noticed how he would stare at spots on her walls where pipes ran behind them, leading her to discover a small leak before it became a big problem. He also acted strange around electrical outlets sometimes. After getting them checked, it turned out 2 needed replacing. One morning, Zayra was surprised to find Pixel sitting by her laptop, meowing nonstop. She had a big project due that day and was planning to finish it after breakfast. When she tried to work, Pixel kept walking on her keyboard. "What's wrong?" "I fed you already," she said, moving him aside. But he jumped right back. After the 3rd time, Zayra decided to check her emails first and found an urgent message from her client. They needed the project 2 hours earlier than planned for a surprise meeting. If Pixel hadn't gotten her attention, she would have missed the deadline. "I don't know how you do it," she told him that evening as they sat together by the window. Pixel purred, watching the street below like he always did, but now Zayra watched too. She'd learned that sometimes the best thing you can do is pay attention when your pet is trying to tell you something. The local shelter asked Zayra to share Pixel's story during their adoption events. She'd show pictures of her ordinary-looking black and white cat and tell people how he'd helped save a building and its residents. Many people started visiting the shelter, hoping to find their own special companion. Thaddeus recovered well from the fire scare. He moved his trains away from the windows and got rid of his old heater. Every evening he'd wave up at Pixel before closing his curtains. Sometimes Zayra thought she saw Pixel nod back, but that was probably just her imagination. As summer approached, Zayra's freelance work picked up. She spent long hours at her computer, but she didn't mind, not with Pixel keeping her company. He'd found new spots to watch from, the windowsill near her desk, the corner of her sofa, the top of her filing cabinet. Each spot gave him a different view of their neighborhood, and Zayra knew he was always keeping an eye out, just in case. Life had settled into a comfortable routine for Zayra and Pixel when something new caught the cat's attention. This time, it wasn't a window that interested him, it was the floor. Specifically, the corner of the kitchen where Zayra kept her recycling bins. At first, she didn't think much of it. Cats could be weird sometimes, and Pixel had earned the right to a few odd behaviors. But when he started sleeping there instead of his favorite sunny spots, Zayra got curious. "Is this your new thing now?" she asked one morning, watching him press his ear against the floor. Pixel just looked at her with those knowing green eyes and went back to listening. The mystery solved itself a few days later when Zayra ran into her downstairs neighbor, Kenzo, in the lobby. He looked tired and mentioned strange noises in his walls. "It's probably nothing," he said, "but it's keeping me up at night. Like a scratching sound." Zayra thought about Pixel's new favorite spot, right above Kenzo's apartment. "Have you called maintenance?" "They came yesterday but didn't find anything. Said the building's old, it makes noises." That evening, Zayra moved the recycling bins and got down on her hands and knees to check the floor. Nothing looked wrong, but Pixel came running over and started pawing at a small gap between the baseboards and the floor. She called maintenance again, but this time she mentioned her cat's behavior and reminded them about the fire incident from a few months ago. Maybe it was Pixel's reputation, or maybe it was her persistence, but they agreed to do a more thorough check. The maintenance worker cut a small hole in Kenzo's wall and sent in a camera. The footage showed a family of mice had made themselves at home inside the walls. They chewed through some of the insulation and were working on the wiring. "Good thing we found them now," the worker said. "They could have caused real problems with those electrical wires." After the mice were safely removed and the walls repaired, Kenzo brought Pixel a new toy mouse as a thank you. "Much better than the real thing," he joked, watching Pixel bat it around the apartment. News of Pixel's latest discovery added to his local fame. The coffee shop updated their Hero Cat's drink special with a new sign telling both stories. People would point up at Zayra's window when they walked by, hoping to catch a glimpse of the neighborhood watch cat. But Pixel wasn't done surprising everyone. One hot afternoon, he started acting strange around Zayra's desk. He kept jumping up and knocking things over, which wasn't like him at all. "What's gotten into you?" Zayra asked, picking up her pens for the third time. She had a video meeting in 10 minutes and needed to finish some work. Pixel responded by grabbing her sleeve with his teeth, something he'd never done before, and trying to pull her away from the desk. The tugging was gentle but urgent. Zayra remembered the fire incident and the mice. She'd learned to trust Pixel's instincts. "Okay, show me what's wrong." He led her to her bedroom, where her portable air conditioner was running. As she got closer, she noticed the air around it looked funny, and there was an odd smell she hadn't picked up before. She unplugged the unit and opened her windows. When the repair person came, they found a serious problem with the air conditioner's cooling system. It had been leaking chemicals into her room. "You might have gotten really sick if you'd kept using this," they told her. "Your cat probably smelled the leak before it got bad." That night, Zayra treated Pixel to his favorite dinner, small pieces of grilled chicken on top of his regular food. "You're getting better at this whole guardian thing," she told him. He just purred and cleaned his whiskers, acting like he hadn't just prevented another disaster. Thaddeus, who still visited regularly, suggested Zayra start a blog about Pixel's adventures. She liked the idea and began writing about their experiences. She included tips about paying attention to pet behavior and stories from other pet owners in the building. The blog caught the attention of a local news station. They wanted to do a story about pets who had helped their owners. The reporter who came to interview Zayra was named Lotus, and she brought her own rescue dog, a gentle brown mutt named Maple. While Zayra talked about the fire incident and the mice, Maple and Pixel got along surprisingly well. The dog lay quietly on the floor while Pixel went about his usual routines, sometimes stopping to touch noses with his new friend. "That's unusual," Lotus said, watching them. Maple's usually very excited around cats. But she's so calm with Pixel. They were finishing up the interview when both animals suddenly became alert. Maple stood up and pointed toward the hallway, while Pixel ran to the front door and started meowing. Zayra opened the door to find smoke coming from under her elderly neighbor's door, not enough to trigger the hallway alarms yet, but definitely concerning. Her neighbor had fallen asleep with something on the stove. "Looks like we got another story for the segment," Lotus said after the fire department had cleared the scene. No real damage had been done, thanks to the early warning. The news story aired the following week, featuring Pixel, Maple, and several other pets who had helped their owners in various ways. The station's website included a link to Zayra's blog, which started getting visitors from all over the city. As summer turned to fall, Zayra noticed her apartment felt different. Not in a bad way, it just felt safer, more protected. She had always thought she was taking care of Pixel, but maybe it was the other way around. Or maybe, she thought, watching him share his window seat with Maple during one of their now regular visits, they were taking care of each other. Pixel's blog had become quite popular by the time winter arrived. Zayra now had readers from different countries sharing stories about their own watchful pets. But she hadn't expected what happened next. One cold morning, she woke up to find Pixel sitting on her chest, staring at her face. This wasn't too unusual. He sometimes wanted early breakfast. But when she tried to get up, he pushed her back down with his paws. "Come on, Pixel, I need to work," she said, trying to move him. He wouldn't budge. Every time she tried to sit up, he'd push her back and meow loudly. After an hour of this strange behavior, Zayra started feeling dizzy. Her head hurt, and breathing felt harder than usual. She reached for her phone and called her doctor, describing her symptoms and Pixel's behavior. "Get out of your apartment right now," the doctor said. "Call emergency services." It sounds like carbon monoxide. Things happened quickly after that. The fire department found a problem with the building's heating system. Deadly gas had been leaking into several apartments. Many residents had already left for work, but 3 people were still home, including Zayra. "Your cat definitely saved your life," the paramedic told her as she checked Zayra's oxygen levels. "Carbon monoxide poisoning can happen while you sleep. You might not have woken up if he hadn't kept you from getting up and moving around." The building needed major repairs. All the residents had to stay somewhere else for a few days while the heating system was fixed. Thaddeus insisted that Zayra and Pixel stay in his guest room. "After what that cat did for me, it's the least I can do," he said. His apartment was now filled with even more model trains, all safely away from heat sources. Pixel spent hours watching the tiny trains go around their tracks while Thaddeus worked on his models. The coffee shop downstairs opened their space for the displaced residents to gather during the day. They set up a temporary office area where Zayra could work on her designs. Pixel came with her, making himself at home on a chair near the counter. People started bringing their pets to the coffee shop too. Lotus would stop by with Maple after her news shifts. Kenzo adopted a cat from the shelter, a shy orange tabby who quickly became friends with Pixel. Even the coffee shop owner got a pet, a retired service dog named Scout who loved greeting customers. The shop became a kind of community center. People who had lived in the building for years without talking to each other were now sharing stories and helping one another. And at the center of it all was Pixel, calmly watching over everyone from his chair. When they could finally return to their apartments, the residents decided to stay connected. They started a monthly pet-friendly gathering in the building's small backyard. Thaddeus brought his trains outside sometimes, setting up temporary tracks for everyone to enjoy. Zayra's blog took on a new direction. Instead of just writing about Pixel's adventures, she shared stories about how pets brought people together. She posted pictures from their gatherings, dogs and cats playing together, children learning to be gentle with animals, older residents finding new friends. The local shelter noticed a change too. More people were adopting older pets, inspired by stories of Pixel's wisdom and understanding. The shelter director asked Zayra to help start a program teaching people about animal behavior and how to understand their pets' warnings. 1 year after the fire incident, the neighborhood had changed. The coffee shop now had a permanent pet corner with comfortable chairs and water bowls. The shelter had a wall of success stories, many featuring pets who had helped their new families in some way. Zayra's freelance work grew into a small business designing pet-friendly spaces for homes and offices. She consulted with shelters and veterinary clinics, always bringing Pixel along. He seemed to enjoy visiting new places, though he made it clear their apartment was still his favorite spot. On quiet evenings, Zayra would sit by the window with Pixel, watching their neighborhood. She could see Thaddeus in his apartment, working on his trains. Kenzo would wave from the street as he came home from work, his orange cat waiting in his window. Lotus and Maple often walked by, stopping to chat with neighbors. "You've created quite a community," she told Pixel, scratching his favorite spot behind his ears. He purred and pressed his head against her hand, then went back to watching the street. There might be more adventures ahead, but for now, everything was just right. The coffee shop's Hero Cats special became a permanent menu item, with part of the proceeds still going to the shelter. They added a small plaque telling Pixel's story, how one cat's watchful nature had not only saved lives but had helped build a community where people looked out for each other, just like their pets looked out for them. And every evening, just as the sun set, You could find Pixel in his window, keeping an eye on the neighborhood he'd helped create. He might have started as just a shelter cat, but he'd become something more, a reminder that sometimes the best guardians come with 4 paws and a loud purr.